I'm going to get right into it and share with you where we ended up with after working since January with a budget focus group where we invite in a bunch of people and they come in and listen to our budget as we go through it, advise us, give us some input, and of course the Board of Education, we work with them along the way. The goal is to teach you a little bit about what we're talking about with goals in the budget and what we look for. We had some unique factors this year that most of you are aware of and you've heard about in the newspapers or in the news. And then get right into what our expenses are, what are our revenues, what do we have to do to balance things with our reserves and our use of our fund balance. And then ultimately, what people want to know is what they're voting on, and that's the tax rate, right? That's how much we're asking for from the community. And we got a couple other things that are going to be on our referendum that'll be out there. So capital project, another one. We're just wrapping up this summer, the one we're currently on, but we have another capital project that we'll talk about as well. No surprise, the mission is the goal, right? So making sure the students have a great academic program, opportunities here at our school district to reach some of these challenges that they have in front of them, and that will always continue to be our due north when we move forward. But here's the budget goals. So the first one is making sure we're maintaining what we're doing. We got some great programs and enhancing programs. We have to stay, that has to be our focus. That has to be our true north when we're moving forward. And we think about that in the budget process. So the second part is, whether we like it or not, this is our 6th year, we have what's called the tax cap, and it's an incredible formula that I am not going to go over with you, but tell you that our history is we try to stay under it, because if we don't, you won't qualify for a rebate if you have the STAR exemption. Okay, so it's important that we stay underneath that tax cap and minimize the impact on our tax rate. And then finally, and I think it's the most important part, is that for those that don't know, we have auditors that work with us, we have financial planners that work with our district, we listen to the comptroller send us reports, and we respond to all those in a way that we make sure our budget is sound and that we're doing things in an appropriate way. You do the same thing at home. It's not different, it's just 80 million times bigger. So, and actually probably even a lot more than that. So when you think about it, it's a huge undertaking, and I think our district's done a great job with that, with the leadership of the previous superintendents. Rick Wood knows it, and we listen to those folks, and we really make sure that we're moving things around or doing the right things with our funds to make sure we're stable in our budget process. Maintenance of effort, when we think about this, think about the tough job we have right now at recruiting teachers. Some of you are in areas where there's 2 or 3 people that get certified in the state. If we have to recruit for technology, we send Tim O'Connor way up to Oswego to start meeting the kids in the beginning of the year, right? It's that tough. So we've been working on that for 5 years now with the Board of Ed, and we're continuing to do that. Our immersion program with Brockport's an example of that, but we get money back from BOCES because it runs through BOCES and we get aid back. So we're making decisions like that to try to make sure we don't increase the budget too much. When you think about digital conversion and all the work we've done with that over the years, we need to continue to finish that. This year, next year, you're gonna have the one-to-one move over to the high school. Who knows when we started the one-to-one initiative? It's been over a decade. The year I started as ASI, we put a proposal in. Kelly Daly was the high school class that went to the one-to-one, and we've been working that ever since. And so we're there, we're doing it. Computer-based testing, I'm sure you heard great things about it the past 2 weeks, but the reality is we were ready for it. The state wasn't. Right, our team did a great job, and the folks that had to respond to that, your colleagues over at Cosgrove and at the elementary schools did a great job with it. So we're ready, we're in the process, but again, that's just an ongoing initiative we have that we have to fund and find a way to do it. Software management, our recruitment system went away, so we had to start a new one. We're working now with our personnel office to make sure we have documents that are electronic for our files, and we're moving in that direction. So these are things that have been in place. So again, it's not one of those budgets where we're doing brand new things or a whole bunch of new stuff. So I talked about program changes. We'll hit employee benefits when we get to that expense slide, but that is a huge challenge because it's going up incrementally, and we got to find a way to make sure that we're prepared for that. The charter enrollment, we went up a couple more students. Again, not a big number, but it could be $12,000 to $15,000, right? So if some of these movements that are going on in state ed with charter schools happen, you could all of a sudden, if you have 10 kids, we have a $120,000 hit on the budget. And we got to figure that out. So those are some new pieces. If you're in Parma or Ogden, you ended up with an assessment this year that's a little higher than you've had in the past, right? Probably somewhere between 5 and 15%. So we know that's a challenge on our budget this year. It's a big challenge. And then minimum wage. We have 2 or 3 bargaining units that in 2 years, people that are hired new will be making more than people that worked for us for 3 years. So that's a challenge on the budget. So we had to figure this out, we had to work through it. And enrollment in general, we staff to enrollment. We do it every year. We work with the high school, the middle school, the elementary schools. And we're not sure what happened 5 years ago, but we have 2 more sections of kindergarten this year than we did last year, and we were forecasting 1 less. So again, the numbers dictate what we do. We're a people business. That's what we do, right? We provide a service, so we have to make sure we staff to our enrollment. This just gives you a quick picture of enrollment. High school's down a bit, middle school's flat, but elementary's going up a little bit. So overall, I think we were down 17 students this year. But ultimately, with these bigger size classes coming in at the lower levels, we're gonna start seeing an increase in our cohorts. But we staff to enrollment, and ultimately, when we were all done with looking at everything in the district, we ended up recommending to the board last Tuesday an $81.1 million budget that the board approved, and compared to last year's budget, that's a $2.1 million increase. So the number, for those that happen to have conversations with people in the community that's important, is that 2.68. That's the increase of our appropriations, or the increase of our expenditures on the budget. We've averaged about 2.7 the last 5 years, or just over, around 2.71. And when Rick and I looked at the overall budget, he told me we were $1.2 million over budget. And I thought Rick was trying to get rid of me in the first year, because that represented about a 5.5% increase on spending. So we've done a ton of work since January to get that number down to 2.68 and be under that 2.7 average. Again, to be responsive to people like raising their hands in here that they're citizens, and what are we doing to try to make sure we don't increase the tax rate. 3-part budget is how we have to present to the public in the state ed. So no surprise, the yellow piece is all of us, right? Or all of you. It's our program. It's working with students. It's athletics. It's instruction. It's special education. The green section is our capital. It's our buildings. It's facilities. It's our transportation department minus the buses. But that's that portion. And administratively, most school districts are in that 10% or just under 10% range, and we continue to say right around 10%. So that just gives you a big picture. But this is the one that's interesting. So each one of these lines include all the things that you talk about all the time, supplies and equipment and furniture. Everyone has all that in their departments. But the big part about this is you see a bunch of red sections up there. Those are the areas that we worked really hard to balance the budget, because when you look at areas like this where the benefits are, benefits alone went up $1.9 million. So the very things that we have to have for a people business go up, right? They just went up about 7% more this year than they did the year before. So I thought Rick was kidding with me when he told me that, but it's true. It's a real number. And we had to figure out how to manage our budget to get that $1.2 million that we were over down to something reasonable where we could work it at the end and go out with a good tax rate. Again, teaching, administration, those are contracts, right? We have contracts, so we're a people business. They're going to go up. But again, you add those together, and that's a big number, so that's why we had to work on this. What we basically did was looked at things like, what work could we do this year instead of next year? Or transportation, right here. What's $139,000? One bus. So we took a bus out, right? But we still have a bus that's got high mileage that a year from now we've got to buy a new one. So we can't do this too much, because we got to make sure we don't have expenses that peak in a year just because we trim things. But we worked really hard at trimming. In central services here, a lot of that's facilities. Like if we were going to do a project at remodeling a room, was it a must-have or was it a nice-to-have? It can wait a year. So we did a bunch of that, and we also looked at expenses like gas and electric and looked at trend line data and brought that down a bit. So fun process, got through it. Budget focus group agreed and supported it. And basically looking at our revenues, when you look at it, this doesn't change from year to year. We're almost every year, somewhere around this 90% of our money comes from these two sources. It's everyone that raised their hand in here and state ed. So some of these other ones, though, are the ones that we're using to kind of balance the budget this year, and I'll talk about that in a second. So state aid, that's how much it went up, 0.64. That's not a huge number when you're looking at the size, an $80 million budget, right? So, but part of the reason this is low is, I don't know if people remember Mike's presentation last year. We were in the part of a 3-year project with giving BOCES money for their capital project, all 9 component districts. participate in that. So the first year we put a lot in and we got a lot back in aid because you get aid back on your participation in that. Last year it was a lot less, and this year it's almost nothing. So what happened was our aid from state ed went down a lot, even though it went up overall. Some people heard a bigger number, around $394,000, but our revenue went down a little bit on aid from BOCES. So that's a big reason why it's not a lot of dollars for us this year, new money. So what we did is we looked at how can we use some of the things that we're flexible with. So reserve funds are those funds where we allocate savings every year or underspent money in our budget to funds that are direct expense related. So this year's big example is we're going to fund the workers' comp expenses. And it's paid for out of that reserve fund, or sort of like a savings account. Fund balance is just that. It's the money that we have left over. If we forecasted X amount of dollars for expenditures on electricity and it came in under, you have underspent money, and the state recommends around 4%. Well, we have extra, so we're going to allocate $384,000 more this year, ultimately to get to a point where we have a tax rate and a tax levy that comes in that's reasonable. This is the quick picture. $81.1 million is the budget I shared with you a little while ago. The revenue that we have forecasted is at 41.4, which means we need 39.7 million. We're going to take away the reserves and appropriated fund balance to bring that number down on the tax levy to a point where it's 37.24 that we're asking for, 37.24 million from the community, from the taxpayers. This number is important because a lot of people think it's actually 2%. The tax levy or the tax cap process, the formula is not 2%. It comes out to a number. Every district has a different number. Ours was the most we could go out for was 2.74 this year, and every year we go just under that to make sure that people get that rebate I talked about earlier. So ultimately we're leaving about $60,000 there that we could have asked for more, but it's not going to change things that much, and it also helps us make sure that people see that we're there, getting to that point with the tax levy. So we're asking for 37.2. But the important part is this. Our budget focus group said it's really important that you provide an example for the community so they can see why we're working hard to keep the tax rate flat. They're already going to see tax increases like this. Whether we raise the tax rate or not for schools, because we got work to do and business to do, right? So we know we have a bunch of taxpayers, and it changes, right? It depends just on your house, neighborhood, the comps in that area. We meet with the assessors every year, but these are real examples from people from our budget focus group. So we took their names off, but when they're already paying $729 more, they don't want to hear that a tax rate's going up 0.5% or another 0.25%. So ultimately, what that led to us is to provide an example with the STAR. Most people have STAR exemptions, or a lot of people do. On a $120,000 taxable value of property at that 24.33 rate is what we're going to be recommending, same rate as last year. A tax bill would be $29.20. The asterisk is to remind people that you can also get a rebate if you qualify for it, but we don't put an amount in there because it depends on your income levels and a bunch of other variables which will change what your rebate is. It's not the same as your neighbors, basically. So this is what we have. We're asking for the same rate that we did last year. It's an estimate. We'll finalize that in August once people are all done challenging some of their assessments and we get real assessment numbers, and we'll know better what that is. But ultimately, if you go back to 2013 and 14, we're still 6 cents below where we were then. And I'm going to go back to that third goal. It's because there's been good planning going on. Some of us were in here when the district had to borrow money to pay for our salaries for a couple months. You remember that? We're not there. We're light years away from there. And again, I congratulate Rick on doing a great job making sure that we continue to stay financially sound. But this is what we're asking for. And this is all the stuff that you do. We have great AP courses and opportunities for students. First Robotics, again, a program that's growing that students benefit from, not just engineers, but kids that are public speaking or they want to work on marketing or teamwork. You know, there's a lot of benefits to the clubs we offer. Choices slip in community service, and then think about all of our athletic programs that do community service. We put a lot back out into the community, right? A lot happens with our programs. DECA, again, national students moving on to the nationals. The music program, scholarships, robotics alone is averaging $100,000 a year. I'm sure we're well beyond that when you look district-wide. If we could just get the kids to fill out the surveys about how much they really get in scholarships and give it to our counselors. We have a lot of great things going on. The winter sports, look at the GPA for 17 of our 21 teams, athletic scholars, and then of course Mr. Schneider and Vanessa and having more state championships. The wrestling program took off again this year. There's a lot of great things going on. We're at the top in the county, right? In a lot of these categories. You know that. You take pride in that. And that's part of what we share with the community. But ultimately, the budget proposal is going to have two of them. The first proposition is going to be for the $81.15, $151,600 budget increase of 2.68 on spending. And then we continue to do this, which is supporting our classrooms with moving towards that 21st century type of classroom. And that since it's in a reserve fund, it has to be part of our proposition. We have to have permission to use that money. This year, because going into a capital project, we have a bunch of middle school classrooms being renovated. Similar to what we did with the Centrums here, we use this money for the Centrum changes we had here. We'll be using that for Cosgrove, so there'll be some for the other buildings, but not as much as there has been in the last couple of years. That's our fourth year of doing that. The second proposition is on another capital project. So similar to the one that's going to finish this summer, it's $12.3 million. It's got a bunch of work in it: paving, fixing ceilings, more security, making sure that we replace our turf stadium, which is really due up next year. So we're going to try to sneak a couple of years out of it because these capital projects take about 3 years to come to fruition. There's a bunch of work we're going to do in this, but again, the reserves that are there, when people get concerned that we have millions of dollars in there, it's going to pay for the local share. So you get aid on a capital project, somewhere 70 to 78, 80% in that range we get. The $3 million out of reserves will offset that work, so there's no extra cost to the taxpayers. It will be paid for through the reserves. Other pictures of examples of work. And then the final thing on the ballot is we have two open board seats, Mr. Michelli and Mr. Hutton, who are currently on the board. Their 3-year term runs out, and we have a third person running, so we have 3 people going for 2 seats. And also, we just need to get people out to vote. We're down to 1,200 people. Okay, 10 or so years ago, we were at 2,100, which isn't even a huge number when you have 10,000 people that can vote. But we need to get people out, because when people vote, the odds are greater that a budget's going to pass. Our approval ratings have been, we almost topped 80% last year. Approval meaning yes votes for the budget. May 15th is the budget vote date. We did not change. We're still using 3 locations. A year from now, we might change just to go to one central location to ease things up a little bit now that we have the additional parking at district office, but we'll probably put a subcommittee together for that. And ultimately, that is the budget presentation. All right, thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.